Watch this space. From RM Online, Palestinians hold the Palestinian national flag and the flag of Hamas militant group during a protest by the Dome of Rock at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in the old city of Al-Quds during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, Friday, April 7th, 2023. The Zionist military has struck targets in the Gaza Strip. From Palestine Chronicle, Jordanians hold massive rally in condemnation of Zionist aggression on Al-Aqsa Mosque. A massive rally was staged in the Jordanian capital Amman on Friday in condemnation of the Zionist aggression on Al-Aqsa Mosque and Palestine worshippers in Al-Quds, Palestinian media reported. Hundreds of people took part in the popular rally, which was organized in support of worshippers at Al-Aqsa Mosque and the two active Muslim groups who maintained their presence at the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex to confront provocative visits by Jewish extremists known as Murabitin, male prosecutors of the mosque, and Murabitat, female prosecutors of the mosque. Prosecutors carried the Jordanian and Palestinian flags as well as banners expressing solidarity, or protesters carried the Jordanian and Palestinian flags as well as banners expressing solidarity with Palestinians in Al-Quds and condemnation of the Zionist occupations against them. Protesters called on the international community to intervene and provide protection to the Palestinian people and to take a firm stance against the Zionist aggression on Muslim and Christian holy sites in the occupied city of Al-Quds. From Samidoun, Defend Al-Aqsa, Defend Jerusalem, Defend Palestine. Protests and actions around the world. On 4th and 5th of April, the scenes of Zionist occupation forces invading Al-Aqsa Mosque during the holy month of Ramadan and brutally attacking Palestinian worshippers were displayed around the world and on video. The beatings, the mass arrests, the vicious assaults on Palestinians gathering in the mosque or in prayer once again exposed the reality of the Zionist colonial project in Palestine. That of the most vicious colonial assault that aims to strip the land identity and holy sites away from the Palestinian and Arab people in order to make way for an invasion by a few fanatical settlers for a few hours later. In the attack on Al-Aqsa, hundreds of Palestinians were forced to the ground, tied and subjected to mass arrest. Once again, arrest, imprisonment, detention, and interrogation were clearly colonial tools used in an attempt to suppress the Palestinian people in their resistance. In fact, many of these had been beaten, injured during the assault on the mosque amid the holy month, when tens of thousands gather every night to worship together. The open brutality of the assault and its clear direction for the interests of the most fanatical sector of the Zionist regime, that represented by Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, and their constituents in the Hilltop Youth, sparked outrage around the world, first and most profoundly the outrage by Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, part of 75 years of struggle against Zionist colonialism, occupation, and apartheid. While this new assault, keenly recognized as an attempt to confiscate holy sites and attack even the celebration of Ramadan by the occupier, and by progressive forces around the world standing with the Palestinian people. However, even many of the very imperialist states and officials that routinely defend Israel or the Zionist entity colonialism and continue to sell its weapons, provide it with aid, and give it a privileged status in trade, were compelled to issue statements of condemnation. The reality was all too clear and the outrage too great. The attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque are an attack on the Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim identity of the holy site, as well as an attack on the identity of Al-Quds. Palestinians in Al-Quds are subjected to ongoing campaigns of ethnic cleansing, forced displacement, mass arrests, and attempt to strip them of their residency in their own home city. Jerusalem, or Al-Quds, has been illegally annexed by the settler colonial project, the same future it envisions for the entire West Bank of occupied Palestine. During this time, the Palestinian and Lebanese resistance have made clear, verbally and in action, their commitment to the defense of Al-Aqsa and Jerusalem, and all of Palestine from the river to the sea. The strength of the Palestinian people and their resistance in all of its forms inside and outside Palestine is on full display as many tens of thousands of more come to Al-Aqsa Mosque to continue their worship as the people of Gaza stand with pride with their resistance despite the terror bombings of the occupation military. And as the occupation openly expresses its fear of confrontation with the Lebanese resistance, led by Hezbollah that's defeated it multiple times in the past, the prisoners' movement just won a significant victory over a divided Zionist camp, while Qadr Adnan continues his hunger strike for over 2 months behind bars. It's critical for people around the world to come together to defend Al-Aqsa, to defend Al-Quds, and to defend Palestine from the river to the sea from the colonialist onslaught. The imperialist powers, despite some words of condemnation, continue to practice a policy of strategic alliance with the Zionist regime. They continue to sell weapons to the occupation and buy its weapons, battle-tested on Palestinians, Lebanese, and Syrians. The occupation weapons factories continue to produce their machines of death, while corporations profit from their ties with the occupation. Now is the time to make clear that this is unacceptable and that the people of the world stand with Palestine and Palestinian people to bring this injustice over 75 years to an end, toward the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. We urge you to join the events and actions below in your city to defend Al-Aqsa. Yeah, please do that. And from The Intercept, Israeli settlers move on let me rephrase that. Zionist entity occupiers move on the holiest site in Al-Quds, sending off a new crisis. Emboldenment by Benjamin Netanyahu's government, religious ideologues attacked one of the few spots of Palestinian control in the city. Recent scenes of Zionist security forces beating Palestinians inside Al-Quds Al-Aqsa Mosque have put the Middle East on the brink of a major conflict yet again. In response to Zionist raids on the site, videos which inflamed the region and generated international condemnation, Palestinian militant factions in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon fired rocket barrages at Zionist territory. The fusillade from Lebanon was the largest since the 2006 Zionist invasion of that country. Following Thursday's missile attacks, the Zionist government struck back, bombing targets in both Gaza and Lebanon and announcing a new military operation codenamed Strong Hand. The conflict may seem like just another turn in an endless cycle of violence, but its proximate cause reflects a novel crisis, if only for its depth, the increased radicalization of the Zionist occupying movement and its political patronage by the Netanyahu government. In recent weeks, Zionist occupier groups issued calls to conduct an animal sacrifice at the site of Al-Aqsa, the Temple Mount it's zoned to Jews. Understanding the implications of such an act requires some historical background. The site that presently hosts the Al-Aqsa Mosque was once home to the temple that was the center of the ancient Jewish religion and was demolished following a failed revolt against the Roman Empire nearly 2 millennia ago. Centuries later, after the Roman and Persians lost control of the region, the mosque that stands there was constructed by conquering Arabs. Today, some Jewish extremists in Israel, or the Zionist entity, seek to reassert control over the site and rebuild the temple anew, demolishing the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam, in the process. The threat, however arcane it may seem or sound to secular ears, has driven tensions on the site for decades. When British rule in Palestine ended in 1947, the holy sites were supposed to be shared as part of an internationalized Al-Quds. After the 1948 war that accompanied the founding of the Zionist entity, however, the city was split between Jewish Zionists in the west and Jordanian control in East Al-Quds, including over the old city. The Zionist government took control of the site following 1967's Six-Day War, with its Arab neighbors. Since then, the Zionists have overseen a fragile status quo wherein it controls the city of Al-Quds, yet allows Palestinians to maintain a limited degree of sovereignty over Al-Aqsa itself. This arrangement has come under pressure in recent years. Palestinians have alleged that the Zionists have plans to assert direct control over the site. The annual observance of Ramadan has become a regular scene of violence at Al-Aqsa as Zionist security forces routinely raid the site to evict Palestinians, often using gratuitous violence in the process. The tensions have burst to the fore yet again this year. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that his government has no plans to change the status quo at Al-Aqsa, yet his government includes leaders from some of the most extreme occupier groups in the Zionist entity. Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, the National Security and Finance Minister, respectively, are members of settler movements who pursue a radical religious agenda. Both men have been on the vanguard of demanding changes in the delicate arrangements that currently govern Al-Aqsa. The presence of such figures in the government appears to have emboldened the extremists. Several occupiers in recent days were arrested by Zionist police in Jerusalem on suspicion of bringing livestock to the site in order to conduct a sacrifice there, even though most mainstream Jewish groups oppose efforts to reestablish the temple that this politically ascendant fringe has, since Netanyahu brought its adherents into his government, gained more legitimacy and confidence than at any time in history. In response to the threats by settlers to conduct an animal sacrifice at Al-Aqsa, an act that would be considered equal parts desecration and threat, Palestinians have been holding nightly prayer vigils inside the mosque. The purpose of these vigils is in part to commemorate Ramadan and partly to defend against what many view as a prelude to the later destruction of the mosque that stands there. Nighttime prayer vigils are common during Ramadan, and the attack on worshippers by Zionist security forces wielding batons and tear gas, documented by Palestinians themselves in harrowing cell phone footage, has generated widespread anger. During the day, Zionist police were again videoed appearing to gratuitously push Muslims worshipping outdoors off their prayer rugs. That evening, the Zionist police raids came again to the doorstep of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Although the site has a religious value, it's also a nationalistic symbol to both Zionists and Palestinians. For the latter, it also represents one of the few pieces of Al-Quds that they can still call their own. Palestinians also have very earthly reasons to fear even limited changes to the status quo. The political commentator Matthew Petty recently wrote about the subject. Al-Aqsa is one of the few Arab-run public places in the old city of Al-Quds, an island of Palestinian sovereignty in a sea of Zionist annexed territory. It remains to be seen how far the current military escalation will continue. The Netanyahu government's been embattled by domestic protests in recent weeks and may benefit from the distraction of a foreign war, yet a large conflict with Palestinian groups that generate unintended consequences, including drawing in more powerful actors like the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah, would risk raising the tempo of the conflict between or beyond a point where the Zionist government can retain control. The Second Intifada was triggered by a visit by right-wing extremist politician Ariel Sharon to the Temple Mount, as it's called, so-called Temple Mount. The violence ramps up in the region. It seems as though the Zionist government has once again tripped over an issue that's been a red line in the region for decades. The consequences this time could be more dire than in years. While Zionist governments have occasionally sought out of prudence to police the most extreme members of the settler investment, this time the sound's coming from inside the house. Jordanian people protest in support of Al-Aqsa. This is from daysofpalestine.ps. Dozens of Jordanian people took to the streets to protest against the Zionist attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque on Friday. The rally, organized in front of the Al-Husseini Grand Mosque, showed great solidarity with the Palestinian resistance in the Gaza Strip, West Bank, and the 1948 occupied lands. Participants expressed their support of Al-Aqsa Mosque in the light of the fierce attack it's being subjected to by Israeli occupation forces and settlers. In addition, protests renewed calls on the Jordanian government to expel the Zionist ambassador to Jordan in response to the recent violations in the West Bank and Jerusalem, or Al-Quds. Jordanian activists routinely organized protests and rallies in support of the Palestinian people and to protest against Zionist crimes and human rights violations.